I don't want to write a middle grade fiction detective series.
I think you do, though. Because when I was reading it, I could tell you were having fun.
Yeah, but I'm not writing a book to have fun. If I don't write my book of essays now, I never will.
So, don't write your book of essays.
I have to.
Why?
Because if I don't, that means that all the damage I got isn't good damage. It's just damage. I have gotten nothing out of it, and all those years I was miserable was for nothing. I thought that everything, all the abuse and neglect, it somehow made me special. And I decided that one day I would write something that would make little girls like me feel less alone.
Then maybe write this other book. Maybe this book does that too.
Yeah?
So here's the thing about good damage in Bojack Horseman. It's the title of an episode in Season 6 centering on Diane, where she struggles to write her book of essays. The piece that she believed would add value to her entire life, put everything she went through into context, and finally make all that trauma she endured worth something. Something that would show the world, her family, all her bullies that they were wrong about her. Something that would inspire millions and lift them out of the awful place that she was raised in. Not only is this a great representation of what it's like to write. All of my essays pretty much sound like Diane's first attempt at writing her novel in the beginning of this episode.
Hello, I am Diane, and I am a young girl living in Boston, and ever since I was that, I wanted to write good things that were good. This is not good. Fix this later.
But it's also an excellent portrayal of the effects of trauma experienced as a child later in life, how the brain tries to cope with it, and the dangerous roads that our thinking can take us down. This episode contains some great advice for those who are struggling to reconcile or come to terms with their own damage. One piece of that being not every situation that will happen to you in your life will be positive, but they are all opportunities for growth and help you become the person that you are. And that gives it meaning. There's a ton of situations throughout the series that could be attributed to this concept, where even though they broke our hearts in the moment, they aided in our character's ability to grow and move forward for the rest of the series. There's many different terms for this as well as I researched it: post-traumatic growth, reported growth, adversarial growth, but the core message remains the same. Certain coping strategies are associated with high amounts of internal maturation. And as many are aware, many times when we suffer a loss or suffer through a trauma, our worldview can be permanently affected, recognizing the possibility that this hurt may happen again, and thus emotionally preparing us for those hardships before they occur again. Or we may resolve to look for some sort of meaning in all of our suffering, resolving to move forward and make sense of what has happened by continuing to live our life, a process I'll discuss in more detail later in this video. But this disruption of our core beliefs can be a necessary catalyst for ourselves to develop as people. Diane states this concept about her relationship with Mr. Peanut Butter later this season in the episode Angela, where, of course, their relationship caused them both a good deal of pain for an extended period of time. It hurt them, changed them, but ultimately, when they're in a better place by the end of the series, they realize that they aided one another in recognizing their own flaws and being able to reach this positive place that they are now living in. It doesn't happen immediately. Of course, there are mistakes made by both of them after their divorce, but they still help each other a great deal in becoming these developed characters that we meet at the end of the series. Diane learned a lot about what she wanted out of life and who she was as a person during her marriage to Mr. Peanut Butter. That although she needed someone with less cynicism from Wayne, her previous boyfriend, and is generally more supportive, those qualities in a vacuum or in excess is a swing too far in the other direction, with Mr. Peanut Butter surprising her with gestures that he assumes she would appreciate based on what he likes, rather than actually assessing her desires and planning a night she would genuinely enjoy. Positivity in a partner does not guarantee happiness or a perfect match, even if you are trying to be that person yourself, hoping that they will rub off on you. She also struggles with simply being a wife and searching for meaning beyond it, eventually resolving to travel to Cordovia to help refugees, but discovers that she wasn't able to effectively deal with the trauma and distress that she witnessed there, sinking into a depression when she returns. She really has to analyze where she'll find her place in this world, and how she can find purpose if she can't be that person she always perceived she would be, traveling the world and heading to war zones to help those most in need. In Diane's mind, that was one of the ways she would use her damage and turn it into good damage, as she states in this episode. And she really puts herself down for not being able to stomach the horrors she witnessed, even though it is completely reasonable for many not to be able to handle those horrific situations. Instead, she moves forward, resolving to find purpose and utilize her damage in another way, presumably through her book of essays, though it continually gets delayed due to life stuff. She's even able to develop and begin to work past some of her own flaws in this marriage, like in the episode Love and/or Marriage, where she struggles to express her emotions and genuinely has to work on showing love to those around her, opening herself up and allowing others in, as she previously often tried to close herself off, pretending to be someone that she's not, like when she accompanies Mr. Peanut Butter to the Halloween party. But through going to this party with this celebrity where she feels she doesn't fit in, she realizes that she can be expressive to Mr. Peanut Butter if she truly wants to, and doesn't have to put herself inside of a box, limiting herself and putting up thick walls around her, which is a really important step for her moving forward. Not to mention, regardless of all of these negatives that help them learn about themselves from the relationship, Mr. Peanut Butter also valued Diane in a way that she had never felt before in her entire life. He loved her so much, even if it didn't work out, and that means a lot, and does a lot for Diane's sense of self-worth, which previously was never bolstered because her family always put her down and demeaned her. On the other hand, Mr. Peanut Butter struggled with being alone and often rushed into relationships without really considering the consequences or the intricacies of the other person that might cause issues between them in the future. But after his divorce with Diane, he begins to realize why his relationships have gone south so many separate times, and how jumping into them with both feet can lead to disaster because the women he pairs himself with outgrow him as a person while he stays the same. He does stay with Pickles afterwards, but it is clear that he sees the difference between them now and is beginning to grow himself, which is why he's able to let her go so easily when she wants the job with Joey Pogo. Mr. Peanut Butter definitely knows that she won't be coming back to him in this moment, but resolves to allow her to go anyway, knowing that will make both of them happier in the long run, rather than trying to make it work until things become sour between them, as they did with Diane, though they eventually patch things up, and Diane is one of the people who is actually able to help him realize this in the first place. So even though this relationship does not work out, both of them developed forward and were able to recognize and begin working on their own flaws as a result, which aided them in realizing their happiness by the end of the series. Diane being able to fully let Guy in and commit to him, and Mr. Peanut Butter finally being comfortable by himself, realizing what he wants on his own, making value for his life outside of a relationship. It's really a beautiful resolution to their arc where, even though, yes, there were many arguments that made us feel very depressed and very sad for both of these characters throughout the series, in the end, they ended up in a more positive place because of each other and used what they had learned in their relationship to grow as people.
It's really good. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm part of an us, you know? Like, every other relationship, I always felt like a me in a relationship. Does that make sense?
I've always tried to be an us with people even when I could see it wasn't a good idea. Now that I'm single, I feel like I'm finally learning how to be a me.
That's great.
I know there were times you would try to tell me something and instead of listening, I just tried to fix it or convince you there wasn't a problem. I shouldn't have done that.
We're all doing our best.
I'm really happy for you, Diane.
It's funny. I feel like if we met each other as the people we are now, things would be totally different with us.
Yeah, but if we hadn't met each other until now, we wouldn't be the people we are now.
Yeah.
Which is the most positive thing you can do with your negative experiences in your life. I also feel that this applies to Princess Carolyn and Ralph, where, yes, they did not end things on a particularly good note, even when he returns in season 5, and their breakup is definitely one of the most difficult moments in the entire series for PC. But they still learned a lot from this relationship, and at least in Princess Carolyn's sake, used their experience to develop further and recognize their own flaws. At the time, Princess Carolyn struggled to accept help from anyone and resolve to do things entirely on her own, perceiving that to be her most loved and important trait, but not realizing that self-reliance on its own isn't enough to sustain you, and sometimes it simply isn't feasible, like with her pregnancy. But in Ruthie, she still pushes everyone away as she resolves to do everything on her own. But after they had broken up and she found herself in a worse place than ever, she was able to find the strength to rely on other people and to be able to accept help when she needed it, as evidenced by the following conversation with Bojack in the season 4 finale.
What's wrong? I said I'd do it.
It's just really hard to need people.
Yeah, but...
Yeah. Thank you.
That small moment with the "but" from Bojack and then understanding is incredible dialogue and voice acting. Not exactly telling you what they're trying to convey, but directing it in such a way that you can feel what they mean to say. That it is hard, but it's worth it, isn't it? And it helps, doesn't it? Even Princess Carolyn and Bojack, though their relationship was definitely based heavily on her need to fix others and Bojack's need for someone to fix him, they do truly care for each other as people and are crucial in each other's lives to help develop and move forward. Bojack is the one who gives Princess Carolyn a pep talk when she struggles to rely on others after that episode in Ruthie where she pushes everyone away, and also states that she would be a great mother and should move to adopt, helping her to make that extremely difficult choice and aiding to lift her out of the funk that she was in during that last arc of season 4. I truly think this conversation is one of the main things that pushes Princess Carolyn forward to actually move to adopt a child and accept help from others. Not to mention that even though he treats her harshly in the flashback to 2007, and yes, it definitely shows how they aren't right for each other romantically, he does motivate her to take the agent job for herself, which she does immediately get. Again, it's important to recognize that even if these relationships are not overtly positive, they can help the characters recognize their own flaws and grow as a result, moving to what makes them ultimately more happy in life. I mean, Princess Carolyn had been aspiring toward that job for years, but Bojack was the one who gave her the final push to go for it. And Princess Carolyn sticks by Bojack professionally, helping his career continue when it by all means should have fizzled out multiple times. I mean, even after she learns about some of his worst mistakes in the final season, she still resolves to help him save face and try to keep his public image on track. I mean, if he had followed her advice exactly, that one interview with Biscuits Braxby would have worked like a charm. She recognizes that Bojack is doing well and works very hard to preserve and uphold his development because she genuinely cares for and wants the best for him. Though their relationship did not work out, they did form a lifelong friendship from this rather toxic romance, learned to truly care for one another, and lifted each other up during some of their lowest moments. And it was so important for both of them to be able to move forward with their lives. Who knows if Princess Carolyn would have gotten her happy ending with Judah, or Bojack would have gone through as much development as he did by the end of the series if they never met each other and dated, because they ended up being crucial in each other's development going forward and their happy endings at the end of the series. Even Bojack, though his ending isn't overtly happy, is in a more positive place thanks to Princess Carolyn's help, confidence, and support. You could even apply this to Princess Carolyn's childhood, where because of her really large amount of siblings and her mother's general neglect, she had to really take charge and become a very responsible person, perhaps way too young. Which is of course unfortunate, and I definitely am not endorsing this type of childhood, and I wish Princess Carolyn did not have to go through any of this. But I will say her stick-to-itiveness, confidence, and ability to work extremely hard toward her goals were developed partially from how she was raised and contributed to her success with her companies later in the series. Whenever she does fail, she always comes back stronger the next time because she has already learned to face adversity through this childhood. And while it isn't a great thing, as I said before, I do think it helped her become the person she is today and contributed to some of her personality traits that resulted in her success. Now, it also contributed to some of her personality traits that stunted her emotionally. It's important to recognize both sides of this, but there is an important concept here about Princess Carolyn being able to use those skills that she learned as a child to create her own success later in life in a more positive atmosphere. It's all like Kintsugi. Even though this idea doesn't come to fruition and is often used as a distraction from writing this episode for Diane, the idea of being more beautiful because you have learned to heal from your damage and that it doesn't make you any less of a person or any less worthy is a wonderful lesson to take and is extremely important. You can use your damage, your negative experiences, your trauma to learn and grow to become more full and developed. You don't have to use them necessarily for physical accomplishments, like Diane is talking about here with her book of essays, which I'll discuss more later in this video as well. But you can use them to help yourself become a more full and well-rounded person. It doesn't have to hold you back, control you, cause you to lash out, and it can even be used as a vehicle for positive change. And that is one of my favorite things that this episode teaches us. But it also shows us that you might not be forced to use it in the way that you thought that you would. Diane expects her damage, everything she suffered through as a child, to allow her to create this extremely dark book of essays reflecting on exactly what happened in her life, analyzing and fixating on all those negative experiences directly and taking lessons from them on a one-to-one basis. But she discovers that she doesn't exactly have to force herself to relive and reopen all of those wounds to be able to create that piece of media that will help those who are experiencing the same thing as she did when she was a child. She can, in fact, even have fun doing so. Honestly, I think this is the most important part of all of this. Some people feel that her not analyzing her childhood through a book of essays is a mistake, but realistically, why does it have to be so visceral? Ivy Tran could be equally therapeutic for her to write. Not to mention, has a way more likely chance of reaching that age group that she wants to lift up by being an entertaining young adult mystery, as well as a piece of media that explores these themes of neglect and loneliness that could help those in a similar situation. I mean, theoretically, how would the book of essays ever be marketed to preteens or children? That's an important part that I never really considered before making this video. But it's important for us to do things not because of some obligation, but because we truly want to do so. It becomes more and more obvious as this episode goes on that Diane clearly does not truly wish to be writing this essay and does not enjoy doing so. Ivy Tran, however, spills out of her easily and shows how when you are actually passionate about something, you're more able to easily immerse yourself and get into a flow with what you're writing and just enjoy it. I mean, Diane struggled to write a single sentence of her book of essays. Plus, Ivy Tran is clearly quality because every other person we see read it in this series loves it. Like, literally not a single person disses it. And it does those same things that her book of essays was meant to. Such a beautiful message, and I applaud Princess Carolyn for helping Diane to come to this conclusion this episode. And as a result, from restricting herself so heavily to this book that will transform her damage from her perspective, Diane even thinks that to be able to create this, she needs to be able to access her trauma in vivid detail, even taking herself off of antidepressants, to be able to reach that supposed place that would allow her to write and accurately represent those dark thoughts and emotions. But ultimately, when she does go off of her medication, the only thing she does is tear herself down, succumbing to those criticisms that would come from her parents and siblings, rather than being able to accurately reflect on them and rationally develop and learn lessons from them in the process. It's also evidenced by her going to Cordovia and attempting to stay even though she struggles to keep up with the devastation on a daily basis. And because she puts herself so heavily into this box, this perceived amazing special person who does incredible dangerous acts of generosity because of their tortured past, she sinks down a great deal when she fails to meet that expectation and resolves to avoid facing that failure by staying at Bojack's and simply drinking her days away. But it also teaches you that what you intend to say, what you create, might even reach people that you didn't expect to reach. I mean, that's the thing about connection and finding things to relate to in media. It's not limited to those who had the exact same experience as you. Even those who were raised under vastly different circumstances and didn't have to face those same struggles you did as a young Vietnamese girl with a house full of people who put you down, are able to relate to at least some parts of your story. I mean, there are so many people who are able to relate to Bojack. Does it mean everyone is as far down Bojack is in that cycle of alcoholism and casual abuse? No, but there are parts of him that are certainly relatable to those who have dealt with anxiety and depression. Sunny was raised by two parents who don't get along super well, but both seem to love him a great deal, and even though he's the more popular jock that Diane would not have been friends with in high school, and likely would have hated from a distance, he is able to relate to Ivy Tran in a really major way. He is able to identify with Diane's self-insert character in her grade school mystery series, as his father is often away, causing Sunny to feel a bit distant from him, as Ivy Tran does from her own father, who I believe is deceased in the actual book. This book, though, helps him realize that his father's love for him is still present even when he's not around, and we can see by how much Guy evidently cares for Sunny how true this is. He connected emotionally with this book, saw a bit of himself in the main character, and genuinely gained some comfort from reading it, and perspective. He was even able to recognize how it would be good for girls who don't have good self-esteem, or perhaps young Bison in his case. And before this, we did get a pretty good look at how Sunny might treat the girls in his school around his other guy friends. Thus, this book seems to have helped him to identify with those girls he was previously mocking or making fun of, and will result in him doing so much less and recognizing that own behavior more often. It helps on both sides, which Diane never expected because fundamentally she could not understand the people who were bullying her. Although she does state this earlier in the episode, where she says Chrissy Keating was a real bitch to her, but ultimately might have been damaged herself. This book even gives Diane more perspective on the conflicts in her high school that were seemingly very simple and one-sided. I mean, bullies are usually going through inner turmoil themselves anyhow, and it's important to recognize that, but you know, not excuse their behavior, of course. I mean, that's like the theme of 90% of my videos. She's able to help those conflicts in that school that she experienced from both sides, not just make those little girls who are being bullied feel less alone, but the bullies themselves so that they don't perpetuate that behavior over and over again. The point is that Diane is able to do exactly what she always set out to do. Use her trauma, her horrible upbringing, to make girls like her feel less alone, but not at all in the way she expected. And when she allowed herself to follow what she was passionate about, rather than forcing herself to use her damage in the way she perceived she had to, she was able to create something that she was incredibly proud of, one that fulfilled her, and one that helped young kids growing up all over the country, even ones in vastly different positions that she did not expect to reach at all. Art is funny that way. And another thing this episode teaches us, and that is so important, is that you might not be able or have to use this damage at all. One of the most important takeaways from this episode is that damage doesn't always have a purpose. Not everything happens for a reason. It really hits home when Princess Carolyn says, "So, don't write your book of essays." And Diane asserts that she has to. Oftentimes, when we go through difficult things, we feel that it must be worth something in the end, that we need to become something amazing or spectacular to be able to make up for this torture and provide some sort of logical sense to all of that mistreatment. The universe did this on purpose to make me special. Everything happens for a reason so that I had to learn from it. It's part of a process called meaning making, where when we can't reconcile a situation with regard to our personally held beliefs about reality, why bad things happen, fairness, and control, we cope with them by assigning meaning to help us adjust and move forward from the situation, which is not always a bad thing. When we go through trauma and it clashes with our global meaning, our perception of the world as a whole, it creates distress within us that is utterly painful, and it forces us to look for something to make sense of the situation and help ease that pain in turn. Positive reappraisal is a very common tactic where many outline the consequences of those traumatic experiences as generally beneficial for themselves, as I mentioned earlier in this video, and as I think Diane is trying to state this episode. If she is able to write this book of essays, she is able to definitively make meaning out of her trauma and have physical evidence of the benefits that resulted from her horrible upbringing. This, in turn, will help lessen the pain of reflecting on that childhood in the long run, because she can actually say, this successful book that is helping thousands of children is the result of that, and that's why I needed to go through it. There was meaning to it. It's also all a very common reaction and symptom of CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder as well. As always, all of my sources for this are linked in the description below, but for those who have not heard of CPTSD, it differs from regular PTSD in that it's based off of trauma exposed over a long period of time, repeated behavior that occurs over and over for months or years, rather than a single traumatic event, and has been shown to develop from prolonged childhood trauma as well, correlating to the child's self-esteem and their ability to formulate their own self-worth. And listen, a lot of people devalue Diane's complaints about her awful childhood because her parents or brothers weren't outwardly physically abusive and just generally not as bad as Bojack's parents from a lot of people's perspective, but I think a lot of them fail to recognize the mental toll living in that house would cause on a person, specifically a woman. All of the men in that house actively devalue all women and make them feel as less than, stating that it's their job to have periods and such, not really believing that they could be more successful than any man or live any sort of textured and important life, sometimes even intentionally forcing them to lose just to protect the egos of the men all around Diane. Plus, they emotionally tortured her with the whole cry-an thing. Honestly, like, Diane, I'm not sure I would have ever recovered from that. Imagine having no friends, no family to confide in, and the only person you've been able to talk to was actually just a fake persona invented for a prank specifically to make you feel lonely and worthless. Obviously, I dislike her brothers, but I hesitate to say that I hate them because of how much I pity their lifestyle. It's just so sad. And the only reason they take Diane down is because she was able to make something of herself. Side tangent, sorry. But every time she has a success, it's diminished. Any time she tries to win, she's taken back. It utterly devalued her before she was able to leave and try to make a life for herself. But a common trait for those with CPTSD is a feeling as if they are different than others due to their treatment as a child, and, of course, difficulty with their feelings of self-worth. In this combination, Diane feels that she herself does not have value due to all of that treatment that helped her feel as such throughout her childhood, but can make her life have value through this book, transforming the purpose of her life itself and becoming that special person that she believes this treatment had made her in the long run. But ultimately, your damage is not all you are. Of course, it shapes us, it changes us, it can affect our ability to regulate our emotions, but it doesn't take our identity from us, and this is something that Diane needed to learn. She often lumped her damage and traits that developed from responses to trauma in with her identity as a person, stating that it was classic Diane, that one who was always dissatisfied, ruining her own happiness, and taking herself down, focusing on the negative, and would never actually be able to live a life that she was satisfied and happy with. But I'm glad that Diane was able to create something that reflects all of that about her. It isn't solely a book about damage, because that's not all Diane is, and her time in the show with Guy, and even some advice from Bojack, has helped her to realize that she is more than all of the behavior that has stemmed from that trauma. She has creativity, a liveliness inside of her that is 100% hers alone, and Ivy Tran allows her to show that to the world along with her damage and make those who have experienced similar damage feel less alone themselves, presenting her as a more complete person, one absolutely filled with worth and not just given worth because she wrote a book exactly about what happened to her as a child. It doesn't mean that you have to use it. Princess Carolyn is right that she doesn't need to write this book of essays or create this piece of media to make her life worth something or have value. While Diane states that it makes it feel as if she could have just been happy and well-adjusted this entire time if she doesn't write this book, that was never the case. Sometimes things just happen to us. It isn't for anything. Other people might have it easier, and the world can often be unfair. But however, like Diane's arc shows, you can improve and learn to cope with these hardships you've been given, and live happily, as she does with Guy. It isn't hopeless just because you've suffered, or just because you have had unfair experiences, nor does it mean you need to become some sort of icon to make your life and what you've gone through worth something. All you need to do is find happiness where you you can and learn to be better. If you can use what you've experienced to grow as a person, that's really all you can do. Not everything is in our control. Anyway, I hope this video helped you guys with something. I hope it was a good analysis of good damage. I know it's a lot of people's favorite episode. Mine too. And if you had anything to add on this subject, please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed, consider supporting us further on Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's PosiTVty. There you get extra content in the form of unedited essays. So you get to hear all of my mistakes, although I'm trying to get better at not making them, and my extra little comments about what will be edited out and perhaps things that, you know, aren't fit for YouTube. But you also get these videos way before they come out here. The support on YouTube, though, does mean a lot. Liking, subscribing, hitting that sweet bell is all wonderful and helps this channel grow and succeed, and we thank you all for doing any of that. Please discuss further in the comments below. As always, I love talking about this show. Clearly, I've made so many videos about it at this point. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Let me know what you think it should be.